The Invisible Power of Persuasion by Elliot Graves. Published by Audiobooks Hub. Chapter 1. There's a force that shapes our decisions every single day. It whispers in our ears when we think we're thinking freely. It nudges us toward choices we believe we make independently. It moves through conversations, glides across advertisements, and hides in casual advice. This force doesn't shout, doesn't demand, it persuades. Quietly, elegantly, and often invisibly. And yet, it determines what we buy, whom we trust, which ideas we accept, and even who we become. We live in a world driven by persuasion. Not the loud kind that commands or manipulates, but the subtle kind, the one that works beneath the surface. It's in the smile of a stranger who convinces us to open up. It's in the pause of a speaker who makes us lean in. It's in the gentle framing of a sentence that turns maybe into yes. This book is about that power, the invisible power of persuasion. Most people associate persuasion with sales, politics, or advertising. And while it's true that all those fields rely heavily on persuasive tactics, the real magic of persuasion lies in everyday life. It happens between friends, between parents and children, in classrooms, on social media, at the dinner table, and even in our inner dialogue. Whether we are aware of it or not, we are constantly persuading and being persuaded. The goal of this book is not to turn you into a manipulator. Quite the opposite. It is to make you aware, sharply, intelligently, and ethically aware of how persuasion works, how it flows through human behavior, and how to use it responsibly. Once you begin to see its patterns, you can never unsee them. You will begin to recognize the tools people use to influence you, and you will learn how to use those same tools yourself. Not to deceive, but to connect, to lead, and to inspire. But let me be clear, persuasion is not a magic trick. It's not about hypnotizing people or bending them to your will. True persuasion is built on understanding. It is rooted in psychology, empathy, and timing. It begins with listening. It gains power through trust. And it succeeds not when someone says yes out of pressure, but when they say yes because they genuinely want to. Throughout history, the most influential figures, leaders, thinkers, artists, and even revolutionaries have all understood this principle. They didn't rely solely on logic or brute force. They tapped into something deeper. They knew how to plant ideas, how to shape perceptions, how to create emotional resonance. They knew how to persuade. Invisibly, think of Martin Luther King Jr., whose speeches stir hearts not because of fact alone, but because of how he made people feel. Think of Steve Jobs, whose product launches weren't just technical presentations, but performances that sparked desire. Think of Malala Yousafzai, whose calm, clear voice carried more weight than angry protest. These are people who understood the invisible power of persuasion and use it to change minds and even change the world. Now, let's bring it closer. Think about a time when someone convinced you of something, and you didn't even realize you were being convinced. Maybe a friend talked you into watching a movie you didn't think you'd like, and you ended up loving it. Maybe a teacher explained a difficult concept in such a simple, compelling way that it just clicked. Maybe someone simply asked the right question at the right moment, and it shifted your whole perspective. That's persuasion in action. It's not always dramatic. Often it's just smooth, invisible. This book will explore that smoothness, that subtlety. Each chapter will focus on a specific aspect of persuasion, from the psychology of influence to the power of story, from the science of body language to the rhythm of words. We will examine both the techniques and the mindset of effective persuaders. You'll see how context matters, how emotion overrides reason, how people resist being told but embrace being shown. But this book is also personal. As you read, you'll likely begin to recognize your own patterns, times when you've been persuasive without knowing it, and times when you were easily persuaded. You may revisit conversations and suddenly realize what was really going on beneath the surface. You may even notice how you persuade yourself every day, convincing yourself to get up, to take a risk, to stay safe, to dream bigger, or to give up too soon. Persuasion isn't just something that happens between people. It's something that happens within us. There's a secret that runs through every chapter of this book, one I'll only reveal in the end. But I'll tell you this, the most powerful persuasion doesn't begin with words or gestures. It begins with presence, with knowing who you are, what you stand for, and how to tune into others without losing yourself. The invisible power of persuasion isn't about control, it's about connection. So, if you're ready to look beneath the surface of communication, of behavior, of influence, keep reading. This is not a book of tricks. It's a book of truth. And once you learn how persuasion really works, you'll never see the world the same way again. Chapter 2. To understand the power of persuasion, we must first understand the mind it speaks to. Human psychology is not a machine built on cold logic. It is a dance between thoughts, emotions, and experiences. And persuasion is not a key that unlocks a single door. It's a melody that makes the mind want to open itself. Most people think persuasion is about providing the best argument. Say the smartest thing, show the strongest evidence, and people will agree. But in real life, that's not how it works. Human beings don't make decisions based solely on facts. We make them based on how we feel about those facts. And that's where persuasion begins. Not with the content, but with the context. Imagine someone tells you to eat healthier. They list the benefits of vegetables, quote scientific studies, and even give you a meal plan. You might nod, say it makes sense, and still order fast food tomorrow. Now imagine a close friend tells you how their life changed after eating better. They describe how they feel more alive, more confident, more energetic. They're not lecturing, they're sharing, and something inside you stirs. You feel it. That feeling becomes a thought. That thought becomes a decision. And suddenly, you're considering a salad instead of a burger. That's persuasion at work. It begins with emotion. Persuasion speaks a language of feelings first, then translates into reason. If you try to persuade the mind without touching the heart, you're just noise. But if you reach someone emotionally, their mind will find a reason to agree with you. We call this post-rationalization. People often justify choices they've already made emotionally, using logic afterward. This isn't a flaw. It's how we're wired. In psychology, there's a concept called cognitive ease. It refers to how easily our brain processes information. The easier it is, the more we trust it. This is why smooth speakers, confident body language, and simple phrasing are so persuasive. They don't just sound good, they feel good to our minds. And when something feels good, we tend to believe it's true. This is also why repetition is so powerful. The more we hear something, the more familiar it becomes. And familiarity breeds trust. Advertisers know this. Politicians know this. Great speakers know this. They don't just say something once. They repeat it with rhythm, with passion, and with purpose. Not to annoy, but to implant. And then there's storytelling, the ultimate Trojan horse of persuasion. Facts make us think. Stories make us feel. When we hear a story, we don't just listen, we enter it. We imagine ourselves in it. Our brains light up as if we're experiencing it ourselves. That's why stories are so persuasive. They bypass resistance. They disarm skepticism. They connect us. Want to persuade someone? Tell them a story where they can see themselves. Don't argue with their ideas. Invite them into an experience. Instead of saying, this is what you should believe, say, let me show you what I saw. Let them walk beside you. Let them arrive at the conclusion themselves. That's not manipulation. That's guidance. Of course, there are limits. People are not blank slates. Everyone comes with their own beliefs, fears, and filters. We all have mental gates that protect us from unwanted influence. Persuasion isn't about breaking those gates. It's about finding the right door and knocking gently. And sometimes the door is already open. You just have to walk in kindly. One of the biggest mistakes people make in persuasion is assuming it's about winning, that someone has to lose for you to win them over. But real persuasion doesn't feel like defeat. It feels like understanding. If someone walks away feeling tricked or cornered, you haven't persuaded them. You've pressured them. And pressure always leaves a bruise. That's why trust is essential, no matter how brilliant your words are. If people don't trust you, they won't follow you. And trust isn't built by being perfect. It's built by being human, being honest, being present, showing that you care more about connection than conquest. It also helps to understand how people make choices. Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman spoke of two systems in the mind, System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, emotional, instinctive. System 2 is slow, deliberate, logical. Most persuasion happens in System 1. We respond emotionally, then rationalize with System 2. So if you try to start with logic, you're skipping the line. Great persuaders don't argue. They create space. They observe. They ask questions. They listen. Then, when the moment is right, they offer something simple, something clear, something that lands gently and sticks. They don't rush. They understand that timing is everything. And sometimes the most persuasive thing you can do is say nothing. Silence can be powerful. It allows room for the other person to process. It makes your words echo. It gives weight to your presence. In a world full of noise, quiet confidence is deeply persuasive. So what we learned? That emotion comes before logic. That ease and familiarity build trust. That stories open doors. That people must feel safe before they change. And that persuasion is not about overpowering. It's about aligning. As we continue this journey, we'll explore the specific tools and techniques that make persuasion work. Language patterns, body language, tone, questions, structure. But always remember, these are just tools. The real engine behind persuasion is your intention. If your aim is honest, if your heart is open, and if you truly care about others, your influence will grow not by force, but by invitation. Because in the end, the most powerful persuasion isn't about saying the right words. It's about being the right presence. Chapter 3. Imagine walking into a room and instantly sensing the atmosphere, tense or warm, welcoming or distant. No one has spoken yet, but something is already being communicated. This is the silent language of presence. Before a single word is spoken, people have already begun to make judgments. They read your posture, your energy, your eyes. In the invisible art of persuasion, what you say is only part of the message. Who you are when you say it speaks even louder. Presence is often misunderstood. It's not about being the loudest in the room or the most charismatic. It's not about dramatic gestures or commanding attention through force. True presence is quiet power. It's a feeling someone brings when they walk into a space, centered, grounded, and attuned. It's a mix of confidence and calm, intention and openness. And when someone has it, you feel it. At the core of presence is self-awareness. You cannot persuade others effectively if you are not in tune with yourself. People can sense when someone is faking it. They pick up on inconsistency, on tension between words and behavior. Persuasion depends on congruence. What you say, how you say it, and how you carry yourself must all align. If even one of those is off, the message becomes untrustworthy. Think of a time when someone gave you advice, but something didn't sit right. Maybe their words were wise, but their tone was dismissive. Or maybe they smiled, but their eyes were distant. That dissonance is what breaks persuasion. On the other hand, when someone speaks with full presence, with clarity, emotion, and honesty, we lean in. We listen not just with our ears, but with our whole attention. Presence is more than body language, though body language plays a role. Eye contact, open posture, steady gestures, all of these signal confidence and connection. But it's deeper than that. Presence is internal. It's a state of being fully here, not rehearsing your next sentence, not distracted by self-doubt, not trying to control the outcome, just being in the moment with the person in front of you. This is why listening is one of the most persuasive acts there is. When you truly listen to someone, not just waiting for your turn to talk, but really hearing them, you build trust, you show respect, you meet them where they are, and in doing so, you create a space where influence can grow naturally. Many people try to persuade by pushing. They argue, explain, insist. But persuasion often works better by pulling, by being so grounded, so clear in your presence that others feel drawn to understand you. Presence doesn't chase attention, it attracts it, not because it's flashy, but because it feels real. There's also a kind of magnetism in calm. In a chaotic world, the person who remains centered holds power. When others are anxious, your calmness becomes a source of stability. People trust those who don't panic under pressure. This isn't about hiding emotion. It's about managing your internal state in a way that reassures others. If you can stay composed, people will naturally look to you for guidance. And what about voice? Your voice carries more than words. It carries emotion, confidence, and rhythm. A persuasive voice doesn't have to be loud, but it must be deliberate. It flows with purpose. It pauses when needed. It rises and falls naturally. Most importantly, it feels connected to your message. When your voice aligns with your intention, people not only hear you, they feel you. Another element of presence is authenticity. People don't want perfection. They want real. When you allow yourself to be human, to admit uncertainty or share a personal story, you invite connection. And connection is the foundation of persuasion. If someone feels that you understand them, that you're not performing but relating, their guard lowers, their mind opens. Paradoxically, presence is also about absence of ego, absence of agenda. The best persuaders often have the least need to control others. They don't come from a place of, I must convince you. They come from a place of curiosity and service. Let's explore this together. This subtle shift in attitude creates a profound difference in how people respond. You probably met people who speak very little, but when they do, everyone listens. These are people who don't waste words. They choose them carefully. They don't need to fill every silence because they are comfortable with quiet. Their presence speaks for them. And when they speak, their message lands. So how do you cultivate presence? Start by being still. Practice sitting in silence, even for a few minutes a day, without distraction. Notice your breath. Notice your thoughts. This kind of mindfulness helps you center yourself. When you're grounded in your own awareness, you become more attuned to others. Next, become aware of your body. Are your shoulders tense? Are you fidgeting? These are signs of nervous energy. When you become conscious of your body, you can shift it, relax, open up, stand tall. Presence is physical, and your body is the first signal others receive. Then practice slowing down. Speak slightly slower than usual. Pause before responding. Make space between your thoughts and your words. This not only helps you think more clearly, but it also creates a sense of intention and gravity. People will listen more carefully when they sense that you mean what you say. And finally, stay curious. Approach every interaction with the mindset of learning, not winning. Ask questions. Reflect what you hear. Stay open to being influenced yourself. This balance of knowing your own values while remaining curious about others is the essence of presence. Presence doesn't guarantee persuasion, but without it, persuasion falls flat. All the techniques in the world are powerless if people sense you are distracted, insincere, or disconnected. But when you show up fully, when your words, body, and intention all move in harmony, people notice. They trust, and that trust becomes a bridge where true influence travels. So before you try to craft a perfect sentence or memorize clever tactics, ask yourself, am I here? Am I open? Am I connected to what I'm saying and who I'm saying it to? Because in the invisible power of persuasion, presence is the first message, and it's the one that speaks the loudest, even when you say nothing at all. Chapter 4. We often think persuasion starts when we begin to speak, but it actually begins long before that. It starts with how we frame the situation, how we set the stage for what's about to happen. This subtle framing, what we emphasize, what we ignore, and how we position our message, shapes how people receive it. In many cases, it determines whether they're open to hearing us at all. Framing is one of the most powerful and least visible tools in persuasion. It works beneath the surface, directing attention, shaping interpretation, and influencing emotion. Two people can present the same information, but if one frames it as an opportunity and the other as a problem, the reactions will be completely different. It's not the facts that change, it's how those facts are presented. Consider a glass filled halfway with water. One person says it's half full, another says it's half empty. It's the same glass, the same water, the same level. But the way it's framed triggers different responses. One feels optimistic, the other feels lacking. Politicians, marketers, leaders, they all use framing to guide how people feel about what's being said. But framing isn't just about spin. It's not about manipulation. It's about clarity. Every idea comes with a lens, and that lens helps people understand what they're looking at. When you learn to choose the right lens, you help people see what matters most. In persuasive communication, one of the most effective frames is contrast. People don't evaluate things in isolation. They evaluate them in comparison. A $100 product seems expensive until it's placed next to a $300 product. Suddenly, it feels like a bargain. A decision that once felt risky feels safe when compared to a worse alternative. Smart persuaders use contrast to anchor perception, to make their offer look better by what's around it. Another powerful frame is identity. People are more likely to act when the action aligns with who they believe they are. For example, telling someone, please recycle to help the planet, is a nice request. But telling them, people who care about their community recycle, is a subtle identity frame. It invites the person to see themselves as someone who does this, not just because it's right, but because it reflects who they are. Humans are deeply attached to their identity. We will go to great lengths to stay consistent with who we think we are. Great persuaders tap into this, not by changing people, but by aligning their message with the values people already hold. The key is not to fight someone's sense of self, but to speak to it, to affirm it, to expand it gently. There's also the frame of loss versus gain. People are generally more motivated to avoid loss than to gain something. This is known as loss aversion. If you tell someone they could save $50, that's nice. But if you tell them they're currently losing $50 and can stop it, that feels urgent. The threat of losing what we already have stirs more action than the promise of gaining something new. Use this wisely. It's not about creating fear. It's about revealing what's at stake. Timing is another subtle form of framing. The same message can land very differently depending on when it's delivered. A kind word spoken during a difficult moment can heal. The same word, offered too late, might be ignored. A suggestion offered when someone feels stuck might be welcomed. That same suggestion, made when they feel confident and self-sufficient, might be rejected. Persuasion is not just what you say, it's when you say it. Then there's the power of questions. Framing a conversation with a question instead of a statement invites engagement. Statements can feel like walls. Questions feel like open doors. Instead of saying, you need to change how you're doing this, try, what do you think would happen if we tried it this way? A well-placed question can shift someone's perspective more effectively than any declaration. And let's not forget emotional framing. How you make someone feel during a conversation will often be remembered longer than what you actually said. If you frame a message with warmth, with curiosity, with kindness, it creates safety. That safety becomes a container for influence. When people feel emotionally safe, they are more likely to open their minds. Of course, framing can be misused. If you use it to deceive or hide the truth, people will eventually sense the distortion. And once trust is broken, persuasion becomes nearly impossible. So the goal is not to create a false reality, but to highlight the right parts of the real one. Good framing is not dishonest. It's intentional. One of the most effective ways to use framing is by shifting the narrative. People often get stuck in stories they tell themselves about who they are, what's possible, and what can or can't be done. A persuasive person knows how to gently offer a new story, one where the listener is not a victim, but a problem solver, not stuck but capable, not alone but supported. A man afraid to speak in public may tell himself, I've never been good at this. That's his frame. But a mentor might say, what if you've just never had the right tools? What if this is a skill, not a talent? That small shift in frame can open a door. The man hasn't changed, but how he sees himself has. And that changes everything. Framing also helps reduce resistance. When someone feels cornered or attacked, their natural response is to defend. But if you frame your message as a shared goal, we both want what's best for the team, you turn a confrontation into a collaboration. You shift the emotional climate from competition to partnership. And in that space, persuasion flows more freely. So as you speak, ask yourself, what frame am I creating? Am I painting a picture of fear or possibility? Am I appealing to identity, values, logic, or emotion? Am I making this feel like an opportunity or a threat? Framing isn't about controlling people. It's about guiding attention, helping others see clearly. It's the difference between looking at the stars through a cloudy window or a clear telescope. The stars are the same, but how you frame the view makes all the difference. In this invisible art of persuasion, framing is your silent ally. It shapes perception before a single argument is made. It opens minds without a single demand, and it prepares a listener to not only hear you, but to believe you. Chapter 5. When most people think of persuasion, they imagine influence flowing in one direction. Someone speaking, another person listening, and the message doing its work. But this is a limited view. True persuasion is not a monologue. It's a dance. It's not about talking at someone. It's about engaging with them. And one of the most underrated tools in this dance is the art of listening. Listening is powerful because it does more than collect information. It communicates value. When you listen to someone, truly listen, you show them that their thoughts matter. You make them feel seen. And when someone feels seen, they become more open, more trusting, and more willing to hear what you have to say. Most people don't actually listen. They wait. They wait for their turn to talk. They mentally rehearse their next point while the other person is still speaking. They nod politely, but their attention is already elsewhere. This isn't listening. This is performance. And it creates distance rather than connection. Persuasive listening is different. It's intentional, focused, curious. It's the act of setting aside your own agenda and entering the speaker's world for a moment, not to judge it, not to fix it, just to understand it. When you listen this way, something remarkable happens. You begin to hear more than just words. You hear what underneath, the fears, hopes, assumptions, and emotions. And once you understand what really matters to someone, you can speak to that. You can frame your message in terms that resonate with their inner world. This is where many persuaders go wrong. They push a message that they think is important, rather than discovering what the other person finds meaningful. But people aren't persuaded by facts alone. They're persuaded when those facts speak to their lived experience. Listening helps you find that entry point. Let's take an example. Imagine you're trying to convince someone to change their habits around money. You could lecture them about budgeting and financial responsibility. Or you could first really listen to why they spend the way they do. Maybe they grew up poor and spending makes them feel safe, in control, even powerful. If you don't hear that, your advice might sound cold or out of touch. But if you do hear it, you can connect with it. It makes sense that money feels like freedom to you. What if there was a way to feel secure and safe for the future? That message lands differently. It's not just advice, it's a bridge. Listening also creates reciprocity. When people feel heard, they feel compelled, often unconsciously, to return the favor. This isn't manipulation. It's a natural human tendency. We mirror the energy we receive. If someone listens to us deeply, we are more likely to open our minds to them. Their influence grows not because they push harder, but because they connected first. Another power of listening is that it disarms resistance. When people feel pressured, they instinctively push back. But when they feel understood, their defenses lower. They relax. They feel safe. And in that safety, there's room for change. This doesn't mean you agree with everything you hear. Listening is not the same as approval. It's acknowledgement. It says, I see you. I hear you. Your perspective matters. And often, that's all someone needs before they're willing to hear you. There's a subtle magic in the kind of silence that follows a deep question, a well-timed pause, a breath. In those quiet spaces, the other person often reveals something important, something even they didn't know they were carrying. But if you're too quick to fill the silence, you'll miss it. So, how do you become a persuasive listener? First, slow down. Let the other person finish their thought completely before responding. Resist the urge to interrupt, even if you think you know where they're going. Second, reflect back what you hear, not in a robotic way, but with warmth. So what I'm hearing is, or it sounds like you're feeling. This not only confirms your understanding, but also makes the other person feel deeply validated. Third, ask better questions. Don't just ask for facts. Ask for feelings, beliefs, and values. What makes that important to you? How did that experience shape your view? These kinds of questions deepen the conversation and show genuine interest. Fourth, notice nonverbal cues. Sometimes people say one thing, but their tone or posture says another. Persuasive listeners tune into these signals. They notice when someone hesitates, when their voice tightens, when their eyes shift. These are signs of emotional layers that words alone can't capture. Fifth, suspend judgment. You may disagree. You may even be right. But judgment kills connection. If someone senses that you're just waiting to correct them, they'll stop opening up. But if they sense your patience, your openness, your willingness to understand, they'll lean in. And finally, be present. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Put down your phone. Stop rehearsing your reply. Be with the person in front of you. This kind of attention is rare, and rare things are powerful. Some of the most persuasive people in history were not those who spoke the most eloquently, but those who listened with the most depth. Therapists, negotiators, great leaders, they all understand this. Influence begins not with your voice, but with your ears. When you listen fully, you gather invisible data that helps you shape your message with precision. You don't have to guess what matters to someone. They'll tell you if you make the space for them to speak. In a noisy world where everyone wants to be heard, the person who listens becomes magnetic. People are drawn to them. They seek them out. And when the listener finally speaks, their words carry weight, not because they were loud, but because they were earned. So the next time you want to persuade someone, start not by speaking, but by listening. Ask, pause, reflect, and above all, care. Because in the invisible art of persuasion, listening is not passive. It's active influence. And it just might be the most powerful voice you never raise. Chapter 6. In the world of persuasion, we often focus on logic, emotion, and language. But there's another, quieter element at play: credibility. Without it, even the most well-crafted arguments fall flat. With it, your words carry a weight that makes people lean in and listen. Credibility is the invisible foundation of trust, and trust is the soil where persuasion grows. Credibility isn't just about being right. It's about being believable. It's about creating a sense in the listener's mind that you know what you're talking about, that your intentions are good, and that you are worth their time and attention. This belief isn't built through titles or degrees alone. It's built through behavior, tone, consistency, and presence. Think about someone whose advice you follow without question. Why do you trust them? It's probably not because they have a perfect resume. It's because they've demonstrated reliability. They show up, they follow through, they speak with clarity. Their words match their actions. Over time, they've built a reputation that whispers, "You can believe me." In persuasion, credibility is often established before you ever open your mouth. It's in how you enter a room, how you carry yourself, how you look people in the eye. These subtle signals send a message. I am confident but not arrogant. I know my stuff, but I'm still listening. I am here to offer, not to impose. These micro gestures of presence create a kind of silent credibility that speaks even when you don't. Once you do begin to speak, how you say something is as important as what you say. People instinctively evaluate tone. A shaky voice, scattered words, or overcompensating enthusiasm can trigger doubt, but a calm, grounded tone can make even a challenging message feel safe. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It means you need to be real. Authenticity builds more trust than polish ever will. One of the fastest ways to boost your credibility is to acknowledge what you don't know. This may seem counterintuitive. Wouldn't admitting uncertainty weaken your position? Actually, it often does the opposite. When you say, "I'm not sure about that, but I'll find out," or "That's a great question, I don't have the answer right now," you demonstrate humility and honesty. These are traits people trust. No one believes someone who claims to know everything, but we do believe those who are honest about what they do and don't know. Another credibility builder is consistency. If your words shift depending on who you're with, people start to question your reliability. But when your values remain steady, when you say what you mean and mean what you say, people begin to rely on you. They know where you stand. That predictability becomes a form of safety, and safety is essential to persuasion. Your track record also speaks volumes. Have you done what you're asking others to do? Are you living the message you're sharing? A fitness coach who's in shape, a financial advisor who manages their own money wisely, a leader who takes responsibility. These people don't need to say much to persuade. Their example does the work for them. People don't just listen to words. They listen to lives. But what if you're just starting out? What if you don't yet have the track record or the reputation? In that case, lean into transparency. Say, "This is something I'm passionate about. I may not have decades of experience, but I've studied deeply and I care about getting it right." Passion, preparation, and presence can carry you far, especially when paired with humility. Storytelling is another powerful credibility tool. When you tell a true, personal story, you do two things at once. You humanize yourself and you give your message roots. People relate to stories more than statistics. A story says, "I've been there. I know what this feels like. Let me show you what I've learned." Stories make abstract ideas real, and they make you relatable. But credibility doesn't just depend on you. It also depends on who's listening. Different audiences care about different things. A scientific community might want data and peer-reviewed studies. A group of teenagers might care more about honesty and energy. A corporate board might value clarity, efficiency, and logic. The key is to meet people where they are. Speak their language, not to manipulate, but to connect. There's a quiet paradox in persuasion. The more you try to sound credible, the less credible you often appear. Over-explaining, name-dropping, using overly complex words, these can all backfire. They create distance. They make it seem like you're trying too hard. Real credibility doesn't announce itself. It settles in like a quiet confidence. It lets your words breathe. It trusts the message to do the work. Another part of credibility is emotional intelligence. If you ignore someone's feelings, your message may sound tone-deaf, no matter how logical it is. But if you show empathy, if you acknowledge how your listener might feel, you show that you understand more than the facts. You understand them, and that deepens trust. You also build credibility by standing for something, even when it's inconvenient. If you only speak up when it's easy, people will question your sincerity. But when you take a stand that costs you something, people notice. Courage builds credibility, and courage in the service of others becomes influence. Of course, all of this takes time. You can lose credibility in a single moment, but you build it over many. It's the result of choices made over days, months, and years. Every interaction is a vote for how others will perceive you, a vote for whether your influence will grow or shrink. In the end, persuasion is not just about making a case. It's about being a case. The strongest arguments live in the body of a person who embodies them. People don't just believe words. They believe people. They believe character. They believe truth, especially when it's spoken with care and conviction. So before you seek to persuade, ask yourself, do I believe what I'm saying? Am I living it? Have I earned the right to speak it? Because when you have credibility, persuasion often becomes effortless. You won't need to push. People will come closer on their own, not because they were dazzled, but because they were drawn to something rare, something grounded, something real, and that, more than any trick or technique, is what invisible power truly looks like. Chapter 7. When it comes to persuasion, words are only part of the story. Beneath every sentence lies a hidden architecture of meaning, subtle signals and cues that speak to the unconscious mind. One of the most powerful and often overlooked elements in the structure is body language. Before a word is spoken, we communicate. A glance, a posture, a movement. Each gesture tells a story. Our bodies are constantly sending signals, many of which are received and interpreted faster than we consciously realize. In fact, research suggests that a large portion of communication is nonverbal. That means what you say matters, but how you look when you say it might matter even more. Think about a time when someone said they were fine, but their shoulders were slumped, their voice was flat, and their eyes didn't meet yours. You didn't believe their words. You believed their body. This is the hidden conversation we're always having, whether we know it or not. When your body language aligns with your words, your message becomes coherent and trustworthy. But when there's a mismatch, even a subtle one, people notice. They may not be able to explain what's wrong, but they'll feel it, and that feeling creates doubt. So, how can you use body language to become more persuasive? Start with presence. People who are persuasive tend to command attention without demanding it. They don't shrink, and they don't puff themselves up. They occupy space with calm, grounded energy. Their posture is open, shoulders relaxed, spine straight, movements controlled but not rigid. They appear comfortable in their own skin, and that comfort spreads to those around them. Eye contact is another essential tool. It's one of the fastest ways to build connection. Too little eye contact can come across as nervous or evasive. Too much can feel intimidating or unnatural. The goal is balance, steady, engaged eye contact that signals confidence, interest, and respect. It tells the other person, "I see you, I'm here with you." Gestures matter too. When used naturally, hand gestures can help emphasize points, clarify meaning, and make abstract ideas feel tangible. Think of how speakers often use their hands when telling a story or making a passionate point. These movements help anchor the message in space and rhythm. But forced or exaggerated gestures can seem inauthentic. The key is alignment. Your gesture should match your tone and intention. Facial expressions carry enormous persuasive power. A smile, a raised eyebrow, a furrowed brow. Each offers emotional context to your words. When your face expresses genuine emotion, people are more likely to believe what you're saying. Emotion is contagious, and your face is a mirror that others instinctively read. If your expression is flat or disconnected, even the most inspiring message can fall flat. One of the most underestimated tools of body language is stillness. In a culture obsessed with charisma and movement, stillness can feel radical. But in Persuasion, stillness signals control. It says, "I don't need to fidget or rush. I'm at ease with what I'm saying." Strategic stillness, pausing before making a key point, holding a moment of silence after a question, can draw people in. It creates space for thought. It creates gravity. Your voice is also part of your physical presence. The tone, volume, rhythm, and pitch of your speech carry emotion and intent. A calm, steady voice suggests confidence. Variation in pitch and pacing can add energy and emphasis. Too fast and you risk sounding anxious. Too slow and you may lose attention. The most persuasive voices feel alive. They carry warmth, certainty, and focus. Another subtle element is mirroring. This is the unconscious tendency to reflect another person's body language during conversation. When done naturally, mirroring creates rapport. It makes people feel comfortable, understood, and aligned. But if overdone or forced, it can feel manipulative. The key is to be attuned. Notice the other person's posture, gestures, and tone, and let your body respond organically. Proximity also matters. How close you stand or sit to someone sends a message. Too close, and you may invade their personal space. Too far, and you may seem distant or disengaged. The ideal distance depends on context and culture, but being aware of spatial dynamics helps maintain comfort and openness. Breathing is another overlooked aspect of persuasive presence. When you're nervous, your breathing becomes shallow and quick, which can trigger anxiety both in you and your listener. But when you breathe deeply and steadily, you not only calm yourself, you create a sense of safety. Controlled breathing grounds your voice, relaxes your muscles, and keeps your mind clear. All of these elements, posture, gestures, eye contact, voice, stillness, proximity, breathing, they form a silent language that accompanies every conversation. And while you don't need to master them all overnight, becoming aware of them gives you a powerful edge. It's important to note that body language is not about acting or pretending. People can usually tell when someone is faking it. The goal is not to perform confidence, but to embody it, to become the kind of person who believes in what they're saying, who feels aligned with their message, and who lets that alignment show naturally in their physical presence. That said, change can start from the outside in. Just as your internal state influences your body can influence your internal state. Standing tall can make you feel more confident. Smiling can lift your mood. Breathing deeply can calm your mind. By adjusting your body language, you can shift your emotional state, and that shift will come through in how you speak and connect. Ultimately, persuasion isn't about dominating others or overpowering them with charm. It's about creating a state of connection, clarity, and trust. Your body language is the medium through which much of that connection flows. When your presence says, "I'm confident, I care, I'm here with you," people listen, not just because of what you say, but because of how you are when you say it. In the invisible world of persuasion, your body often speaks first. Let's speak with intention, authenticity, and quiet power. Chapter 8. People rarely change their minds because they were told to. They change because they feel seen. They change because something shifts within them. Something small, quiet, but undeniable. At the heart of that shift lies empathy. Empathy is not just an emotional response. It's a strategic force in persuasion. It allows you to step into another person's world, understand their fears, hopes, and beliefs, and speak within their reality, not just your own. Empathy begins with listening. Not the kind of listening that's just waiting for your turn to speak, but the kind that silences your own mental noise long enough to truly hear someone else. When you listen in this way, people sense it. Their guard lowers. Their resistance softens. Why? Because when someone feels heard, they feel respected, and respect opens a door to influence. A common mistake in persuasion is assuming that logic alone is enough. If I just explain the facts clearly, we think they'll understand. But facts don't change minds, feelings do. If someone believes differently than you, it's not necessarily because they haven't heard your facts. It's because your facts don't match their experience. This is where empathy becomes a bridge. Imagine trying to persuade someone to switch careers, adopt a new habit, or reconsider a long-held belief. If you dismiss their fears or label their current choices as wrong, they'll push back. But if you say, "I understand why that feels scary," or "It makes sense that you think that," given your experience, something changes. You're no longer an enemy. You become an ally. Empathy is not agreement. You don't have to adopt someone's views to understand them. In fact, the most powerful persuaders are those who can hold space for someone else's perspective without surrendering their own. It's a balance, staying grounded in your truth while gently stepping into theirs. Empathy also helps you anticipate objections. If you know where someone is coming from, you can predict what they'll resist and respond before the resistance arises. For example, if you sense that someone is afraid of change, you might say, "I know this idea might feel risky at first," and then show how the risk is manageable. That simple acknowledgement can dissolve tension before it forms. One of the most overlooked tools of empathy is asking better questions. Most people ask surface-level questions like, "What do you think?" or "Do you agree?" But empathetic persuaders go deeper. What's holding you back? What would this mean for your family? What are you most worried about? These questions uncover the emotional terrain beneath the surface. And once you understand that terrain, you can navigate it with care. Another part of empathy is matching energy. If someone is anxious and you approach them with overly enthusiastic energy, you may seem tone deaf. But if you meet them where they are, calmly, gently, you create resonance. You show that you're tuned in. Once that connection is established, you can gradually guide the energy upward, like lifting someone out of the dark with a warm hand. Storytelling is one of empathy's strongest allies. When you tell a story that mirrors your listener's experience, you signal that you get them. Maybe it's a story of failure, doubt, or transformation. Maybe it's your own story or someone else's. Either way, stories create emotional alignment. They allow listeners to see themselves, not being told what to do, but watching someone else navigate a similar path. Empathy also disarms defensiveness. If someone feels judged or misunderstood, they'll dig in. But if they feel safe, they'll begin to consider new ideas. Safety comes from tone, from kindness, from patience. It comes from not trying to win every point, but allowing space for silence, for reflection, for uncertainty. There's a subtle, powerful phrase that empathetic persuaders use often: I can see how you feel that way. It doesn't say you agree. It doesn't say they're right, but it shows understanding. That phrase can open 100 doors. It tells someone they're not crazy, not foolish, not wrong to have perspective they do. And once they no longer feel the need to defend themselves, they're more willing to hear a new point of view. Empathy also means knowing when not to persuade. Sometimes the most persuasive thing you can do is pause. Maybe the person isn't ready. Maybe they just need support. Maybe they're still processing. When you respect someone's timing, they remember it. And when the moment is right, they'll come back to you, not because you pushed, but because you gave them space. Being an empathetic persuader requires self-awareness. You must manage your own emotions, avoid reacting defensively, and stay open even when you feel misunderstood. That's hard work, but it's also the work that makes persuasion sustainable. When people feel emotionally safe with you, they keep coming back. They trust that even if you disagree, you'll treat them with dignity. There's a quiet strength in empathy. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It leans in. It listens. And in that listening, it gathers the information it needs to guide, gently but powerfully. Some of the most influential people in history, leaders, activists, artists, teachers, didn't persuade with force. They persuaded with compassion, with a deep understanding of human pain, hope, and potential. Empathy is not a soft skill. It's a core strategy. It's what makes persuasion human. Without it, influence becomes manipulation. With it, influence becomes connection, and connection creates change. So, the next time you find yourself trying to change someone's mind, stop for a moment. Ask yourself, do I truly understand where they're coming from? Have I seen the world through their eyes? Have I made them feel heard? Because when people feel seen, they don't just listen to you. They open to you. And that, more than any technique or argument, is where real persuasion begins. Chapter 9. There's a moment in every persuasive encounter when logic and emotion have done all they can, and what remains is something more elusive. Timing. Even the most compelling message can fall flat if delivered at the wrong time. Likewise, the simplest idea, dropped into the right moment, can ripple into transformation. Timing is the invisible thread that weaves everything together. And yet, it's rarely talked about in the context of persuasion. Timing is not about waiting passively. It's about attunement. It's about sensing where someone is emotionally, psychologically, and even physically, and delivering your message when it's most likely to land. Think of timing as the rhythm of receptivity. People are not always ready to change their minds or accept new ideas. But when they are, that window opens briefly, and the skilled persuader knows when to step through. Consider the concept of readiness. People move through stages of readiness when it comes to beliefs, habits, or decisions. At first, they may be unaware there's even a reason to change. Later, they may begin to feel uncertain, perhaps even curious. Eventually, they become open, and finally, they're prepared to act. If you try to persuade someone too early, you meet resistance. But if you engage them as they move through those stages, especially when they cross into openness, you gain leverage. Great persuaders are great observers. They don't just speak, they watch. They read the room, the face, the body. They notice when someone leans in or pulls away, when the tone of the conversation shifts. When eyes brighten or dull, they look for cues that say, now is the moment, or wait a little longer. These cues aren't always obvious, but they're there, and with practice, you learn to feel them. Patience plays a big role here. Too often, we rush to make our point, to change someone's mind to win the argument. But persuasion is rarely about speed. It's about precision. Like planting a seed, you don't tug it to grow, you wait for the conditions to be right. A rushed argument can trigger defensiveness. A well-timed insight, however, can feel like destiny. One of the most useful tools for understanding timing is silence. Silence is uncomfortable for many people, which is why it's powerful. When you say something meaningful and then pause, you allow the idea to settle. You give the listener time to process, not just intellectually, but emotionally. Sometimes that silence is what turns an opinion into a realization. Silence also allows you to listen. If you're paying attention, people will often tell you when they're ready, sometimes with words, sometimes with a look. They may ask a question, nod slowly, repeat something you said. These are signals. They're saying, I'm thinking differently now. In those moments, persuasion doesn't feel like a push. It feels like an invitation. Another aspect of timing is context. People are more open to influence when they're in certain states, relaxed, safe, hopeful, or inspired. Stress, fear, or fatigue tend to shut doors. That's why timing isn't just about what you say or when you say it, but where and how. A casual conversation over coffee might lead to more openness than a formal pitch in a high-pressure meeting. Environment matters too. A quiet space allows for deeper reflection. A setting with fewer distractions increases focus. Even physical movement, like walking side by side, can influence timing. People often open up more when they're moving because motion changes physiology, which in turn changes thought patterns. Timing also involves repetition. Just because an idea doesn't land the first time doesn't mean it won't land later. In fact, many persuasive ideas need to be heard more than once before they take root. But repetition must be done with care. Too much and it becomes nagging. Too little and it's forgotten. The key is gentle persistence. Return to the idea with variation, curiosity, and patience. There's also a kind of emotional timing. Sometimes people need to feel something before they can hear the message. They need to feel safe or validated or connected, or they need to feel the pain of their current situation. Timing is about knowing whether to speak into someone's pain or into their hope, whether to hold space or to challenge, whether to console or to inspire. One of the best questions you can ask yourself is this the right moment for this message? If not, you might hold it. Wait, let the conversation breathe. Sometimes the most persuasive thing you can do is say, let's talk more about this another time. People remember that. They feel respected. And when they're ready, they'll often come back, this time with fewer walls. Understanding timing also requires humility. You won't always get it right. Sometimes you'll speak too soon or wait too long. That's okay. What matters is that you stay present, stay open, and keep learning. Every encounter teaches you something about human rhythm, and over time, your sense of timing sharpens. You begin to notice that the moment someone asks for your opinion is very different from the moment you offer it uninvited. You start to feel when someone is on the edge of insight, when they're about to connect the dots, and you learn not to interrupt that moment with too much talking. You learn when to push and when to pause, when to let the silence work for you. In the end, timing is about trust. Trusting yourself to wait for the right moment. Trusting the process of persuasion to unfold naturally. Trusting that people, given time and space, often arrive at their own conclusions. And when they do, those conclusions are far more powerful than anything imposed from the outside. So if you want master persuasion, become a student of time. Learn its rhythm, its pauses, its crescendos. Watch for the windows that open quietly and briefly. And when they do, step through, not with force, but with a quiet confidence that you are exactly where you need to be, saying exactly what needs to be heard in the moment it matters most. Chapter 10. In the end, persuasion is not about getting your way. It's about becoming someone people want to follow. It's not about trickery, pressure, or clever arguments. It's about connection, intention, and trust. True persuasion isn't loud. It doesn't demand. It doesn't manipulate. It invites. It draws people, and not by overpowering them, but by understanding them so deeply that change becomes something they choose, not something they're forced into. By now, you've seen that persuasion is layered. It lives in how you frame your message, how you use language, how you create emotional resonance. It breathes in the silence between your words, in the timing of your delivery, in the authenticity behind your voice. The best persuaders don't think of themselves as persuaders at all. They think of themselves as guides, as allies. Their power is invisible because it doesn't rely on dominance. It relies on influence. Influence lasts longer than control. Control may get quick results, but influence leaves a mark that can ripple for years. Influence reshapes beliefs, unlocks new ways of seeing, and empowers people to act on their own terms. And because of that, it's far more potent and far more lasting. The invisible power of persuasion begins with knowing yourself. If your intention is to manipulate, people will feel it, even if they can't explain why. But if your intention is to help, to elevate, to offer something meaningful, that will be felt too. People respond to energy. They may forget what you said, but they remember how you made them feel. If they felt seen, respected, and uplifted in your presence, they'll trust you. And trust is the true currency of influence. So much of persuasion happens before you ever speak. It happens in how you carry yourself, in how well you listen, in how you respond to resistance. Do you become defensive? Do you push harder? Or do you pause, breathe, and seek to understand more deeply? People are constantly assessing. Can I trust this person? Are they for me or against me? Do they care, or are they just trying to win? Every gesture, every word answers those questions. One of the greatest misconceptions about persuasion is that it's about changing others. But in truth, it's about transforming yourself. It's about becoming the kind of person whose words carry weight, not because they are loud or forceful, but because they come from clarity, conviction, and care. When you've done the inner work, when your motives are aligned with service and your actions reflect consistency, people sense it. They're drawn to it. Real persuasion often doesn't feel like persuasion at all. It feels like realization, like remembering something you already knew. That's the magic of it. It doesn't impose, it awakens. The invisible persuader helps people uncover truths they already suspected, take steps they were already considering, and become versions of themselves they were already dreaming of becoming. There's great humility in this approach. You're not the hero of their story. They are. You're not the star, you're the spark. You're the whisper in the moment of doubt, the calm voice in the storm, the question that lingers just long enough to change everything. It's easy to believe that the world is changed by powerful speeches, dramatic gestures, or charismatic figures. And sometimes it is. But more often, it's changed by quiet moments. A meaningful conversation, a story shared at the right time, a sentence that sticks, a look that says, "I believe in you." These are the moments that change minds. These are the moments that shape futures. And anyone, absolutely anyone, can create them. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You don't need to be perfect to be persuasive. You don't need a title, a stage, or a script. You just need presence, patience, and purpose. You need to see others not as obstacles to overcome, but as humans to understand. You need to ask more than you tell, to listen more than you speak, to serve more than you sell. If you've come this far, you've already begun the transformation. You no longer see persuasion as a battle. You see it as a bridge between hearts, between minds, between possibilities. And the more you walk that bridge, the more natural it becomes. So let this be your quiet superpower, the ability to shape thoughts without pressure, to move people without force, to lead without demanding. Let your influence be felt in how you make others feel. Let your impact unfold not in fireworks, but in echoes, in the way your words stay with people long after conversation ends. You now hold the invisible power of persuasion. Use it wisely, use it kindly, and above all, use it to build a world where people don't feel pushed, they feel pulled toward possibility. That's the secret. That's the power. And now it's yours.